All right, here we go. What's up, guys? So today we're going to dive deep into kind of program design and how I look at programming and just what it looks like for athletes in terms of athletes that come through my program and things that I've developed over or learned or whatever over the last like 18 years of working with athletes. Now, the first thing I want you to think about is to keep things as simple as possible. We want to be able to focus on coaching, right? So if we overly complicate it and we don't kind of know how to coach cue and correct the thing, then it makes it too difficult to actually implement the program that we're trying to do. And a lot of times that happens because we overcomplicate it by putting aggressive drills in there or things that we're not super comfortable coaching. So we want to make sure that the first thing is first, and we want to make it as simple as possible that we can easily implement it, easily coach it, and go from there. Um, Programming, as it says in the doc, is you can get programming anywhere, right? You can type in, write me a good strength and conditioning program into ChatGPT, and it'll give you a pretty good program overall. So you have AI, you have all these different things. There's a million resources on the internet. And you can find just about anything at the really the touch of a finger, right? So we want to make sure that the programming is on point, but also simple and things that you can coach, because really at the end of the day, it's the coaching part of it and the relationship building that is going to be the biggest thing for you. It's going to be the thing that separates you from an online trainer. It's going to be the thing that separates you from AI. It's going to be the thing that separates you from the strength coach down the block who might just be out of high school or college and maybe they were a collegiate athlete and now they're training athletes on how to be faster, but maybe they don't have kind of the refined coaching mastery that you do. So that's kind of like what we're really looking for here is to make the program simple, but then also really, really, really work on our coaching eye, which we can talk about at another time. The first thing we want to dive into is do we talk like when we talk about programming, like is it blocks or cycles? You know, whatever we want to call them here. I think a lot of people look at them in different ways. Are we periodizing? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? For the most part, we run a concurrent method. And I think at this point in 2025, pretty much every strength and conditioning program that I've talked to or coach I've talked to runs some sort of concurrent method. And what that means is that they're always working on everything. Okay. You're not like just focusing on strength or just focused on hypertrophy or building muscle. You're not just focused on speed at a certain time of the year. We're really focused on everything. And we might have some ebbs and flows. So maybe during this time, we might have a little bit more speed work and a little bit less strength work. And when this time of year, we might have a little bit more strength work and a little less speed work. But for the most part, we're always working on everything because what we found is when athletes are not working on speed or not working on plyometrics, it has a big kind of fall off in their overall performance. So we want to make sure that we're always kind of working on those things all the time to some level, even if that's at a limited capacity, but we still want to work on plyos. We still want to work on speed, no matter what time of year it is, no matter which part of their program they're in, and no matter anything, right? Because that's going to be kind of the meat and potatoes of how we're going to get athletes to be better. Now, when you look at most programs, they're usually like 4 6 week blocks. I know I just saw a thing with Joe DeFranco talking about how he does 4 week blocks. I stole this idea from Awesome Jokum a while ago, and I really like it. We've been doing it with our adult population and with our athletes for a while now, and that's 3. So the reason why we go to 3 is just because I feel like it's long enough where athletes start to get that itch to do something different, but it's also or short enough, I should say, to move on to something different, and then long enough to start seeing some progress in the things we do. And the reason why we have it, and here's why you can see progress, is because like week 1 is all about learning. So in week 1, we're all about learning the movement we're doing, whether you're teaching an athlete a front squat, a back squat, a trap bar deadlift, a power clean, whatever that movement is, or a speed drill that we're working on with those athletes. So they have an opportunity to learn it in week 1. And most of the time, especially if you have a novice lifter, somebody who hasn't lifted a lot before, done a lot of stuff, then that is going to be kind of like a train wreck week. All right. I just had an athlete in here who's never done a power clean before. And you see there's like everything is all over the place. They can't get their elbows up. They don't know how to get in a position. And then by week 2, that learning kind of, especially for young athletes, is going to happen so fast. maybe for our adults, it's not so quick. But for young athletes, they pick things up, and the next time they come, they're like a different person, right? Their body kind of coordinates everything. Things look a little bit better. They're able to add a little bit more weight to it. And all these different things kind of happen, and just like poof, maybe the light bulb goes off. So in week 2, we work on building a little. And then after that, you get a little bit of weight, you get a little bit of confidence with the movement. And then week 3, we kind of like think about just sending it and see what we can do. The good thing about the 3-week cycle is if you are working on like with a more experienced lifter and you want to extend it to a 6-week cycle, it's really easy just to plug another 3 weeks in after that. And then you could change some other stuff or some other variables into the speed and agility work. Because when you're doing speed and agility work, that stuff changes a lot more rapidly than, let's say, building on a strength work, especially for an experienced athlete. We want to make that speed stuff change a little bit more because the response is so much faster. So again, week 3, you're going to send it, keep it safe with these athletes. We want to challenge them while keeping it safe, teach them how to do stuff. We never really truly do like 1 rep maxes with our athletes. We usually try to keep in the 3 to 5 RM idea, mainly because we're just trying to keep them safe, but also get stronger, right? You don't have to do a true 1 RM to feel like you're getting stronger or to find a true max there. So our cycles. Next, kind of like how do we pair, speed work and strength work together? This is kind of where people get lost in the weeds a little bit. Try to keep it real simple for you here. When we look at different ideas when in terms of like acceleration, okay? So like what do we need posture and position wise to be good at acceleration? What do we need posture and position wise to be good at max velocity or to improve our max velocity? What do we need in terms of postures and positions to be good at changing direction or have good agility? So this is kind of how I look at it. What type of movements do we need? What body parts or muscle functions do we need? And here's what we came up with. So acceleration, we want some heavy lower body lifting, right? Because acceleration is overcoming inertia, right? You're starting from 0 a lot of times, or from, almost 0 if you're just like a soccer player and you're walking around the pitch. So you want to be able to push hard and be aggressive. So that's why we want to have something heavy here, like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts. We love trap bar deadlifts and front squats, but we do other variations as well. You want that anterior core work, right? So you want to be able to maintain postures and positions as you're accelerating, right? Acceleration's like an airplane, right? So you want to be able to maintain those positions. So you want that core work to be able to keep it there and not be bad, both on the anterior and posterior side. So we do a lot of planks, rollouts. And if you are working with an athlete, we'll talk about different variations of 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times a week. But most of our athletes, we either do 2 times a week or 4 times a week. So in our 2 times a week, folks, we're kind of doing everything all at once because they come twice a week. We're doing a total body thing. But if you have a 4 times a week athlete, then we're doing just the lower body part of it. And then we might save and reserve the shoulder stuff that you see in this acceleration example for their change of direction days. Okay. So max velocity, we want more springy plyo work, right? Because when we talk about max velocity and max intent or max speed running, it's more about elasticity getting off the ground. You're no longer using like that musculature like we are in the acceleration part. Or acceleration, we're really trying to push and get out of there. Whereas once we get there, then we're just kind of like being springy and elastic. Right, because of that, we're trying to get like rate of force development to be fast. That's why the Olympic lifts are in there. Unilateral strength, we want to be really strong in that single leg stance position with rear foot elevated, split squats, skater squats, single leg squats, some lunge variations, some floating heel variations. Floating heel is if your toes are on a platform and your heel is kind of floating off the ground. It helps build that ankle stiffness and that elasticity to kind of bounce off the ground for max velocity running. Posterior core work and shoulder work, right? Sorensen holds, right? Nordic curls, and then pulling variations, pull-ups, rowing, etc. Right? From there, we have some change of direction and agility work. And in there, it's really mobility focused for the lower body. We're working on like the abductor groin, right? The external hip rotators. And we want to be able to move in those positions to be able to allow our athlete to get in and out of those positions well, right? That's the thing that, a lot of athletes who struggle with, the change of direction, like the cornerbacks the defensive players or the basketball players, like they have to have really flexible and mobile hips to be able to move in and out of those positions at a fast rate, and do that safely and well. Multiplanar core work, we want a lot of spinal flexion and movement, right? When we think about, leaning into an opponent or getting into positions of acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, we're kind of all over the place. So we got to be able to get low, we got to be able to bend, we got to be able to reach, we got to be able to do all that kind of stuff. So we want to really focus on some of those rotational things for our athletes in the change of direction. So those are just kind of like a general idea or a general overview of kind of what we're looking at there. And let's get into a little bit more specifics here. And this is kind of like a kind of menu for you to use. And then you can kind of plug and play these different things. Rep schemes can be important. They cannot be important. Sort of speed and plyos, maybe we don't want to do too much. And I can give you a more specific breakdown of that kind of as we go along here. But if we're looking at acceleration, you want heavier lower body lifting, like we just talked about, upper body pressing and planking variations as needed or as incorporated, right? And then note there, if you have an athlete coming back from injury and a lower leg because they, different things, like this is where we want to focus on hamstring and hip flexor strength to focus after an injury. But if we're thinking of warm-up ideas, we're thinking of hip flexor mobility, like we just talked about injuries, right? Hip extension, anti-core, ankle stability type stuff. And here's kind of like the menu of things that we would use. And I might plug and play one of each of these things in like an 8 to 12 minute warm up. So usually we don't spend any more than 8 to 12 minutes for a warm up. And I might take a hip flexor mobility drill out of there, like a reverse lunge for a reach or with a reach. So reverse lunge with a reach, open up the hip flexors. Then I might take a hip extension drill, like a good morning, and I'll throw that in next because now I want to hit the save button on my hip extension. And I just opened up my hip flexors a little bit, so I have a little bit more hip extension. So now I want to drive it I want to drive that point home, hit the save button with some hip extension strengthening exercises like a good morning, like a GHD hip extension or a Romanian deadlift. So I might pick one of those. And then I'll hit an anti-core exercise like a forearm plank. And then maybe an ankle stability exercise I might throw in the mix, like an ankle iso. So if I were to put that whole puzzle together, I might set a timer for 12 minutes and say, hey, do 12 reverse lunges with a reach, followed by 10 good mornings, followed by a 30-second forearm plank, and then finish with a 30-second ankle iso on each leg. And then we'll just cycle through that for 8 to 12 minutes. And then they'll be ready to go for the next thing. Okay. And then the next time or the next cycle, you can even switch it from program to program or cycle to cycle. We might switch to warm-ups. Usually I try to keep the warm-ups the same because, again, keeping it simple. So once they learn it the first time, the warm-up goes faster week 2. It goes even faster week 3. And the athletes can maybe push the boundaries a little bit, or maybe I'll extend the plank time. Maybe I'll go 45 seconds, or I'll go 12 reverse lunges or 12 good mornings. I'm like, hey, maybe this week add a little bit more weight to your good morning in the warm-up or build as you go through. So just some opportunities to change it, but not change it. And then from the next cycle, I might just plug and play some 3 or 4 different exercises in there. So then I have some variety, but I'm also hitting the kind of same things. And these, again, these are just a quick menu of things that I jotted down. Obviously, there's more hip flexion mobility exercises. There's more hip extension exercises. There's more anti-core exercises. Whatever you have and whatever you feel comfortable coaching, cueing, and correcting, rock and roll with it. From there, we usually go to some sort of jump, throw, carry sequence or jump, carry, throw. And then here there's a little focus, right? So we want horizontal projections, right? So when we're thinking about acceleration, we're trying to project our hips forward and down the runway. We want to think ankle stiffness. We don't want our ankle to collapse as we're trying to push aggressively out of there. And then we want that core stability like we talked about with that airplane earlier. All right. So don't have vertical jump variations in there. It should be horizontal jump variations, right? So we were thinking broad jumps. We're thinking projections forward. Okay, we want pogo variations. We want skipping and bounding. I love skips for distance or skips for speed, how I tell the athletes, because it gives them a fact that they have to actually push somewhere versus like a skip for height. A skip for height might be something that we put into our max velocity day. All right. Different variations of hopping. You can hop for distance, right? You can hop for height. You can go out and up. You can do different variations there. Bounding. We love a bound, right? Again, projecting yourself forward, going forward. Different carry variations. We might do a front rack carry where we're holding here and having to stabilize our core. We might do a sandbag carry, right? We might do just a traditional farmer's carry. So those are different carries that we might use to give some variety in there, try to challenge them in that. We might do a front rack carry with a barbell, front rack carry with kettlebells. Again, a lot of variety there, and then just a ball slam. right? Overhead, ball slam, be explosive, be dynamic. And then the explosive chest pass where we get athletes to really like project their hips. We usually do that from a kneeling position and get them to really like kind of push their hips forward. And we throw to a partner. So we almost get that like full, if you've ever played football or seen those football athletes do it, they call it like a 6-point explosion. So off of all hands, knees, and feet, and they really extend themselves and project themselves forward. So we want to try to do that with the med ball toss. Next, we have some speed work. Again, we're focusing on horizontal projection, pushing down and backwards, really aggressively pushing down and back. So wall drills, right? Traditional kind of track wall drills where we will do, posture holds. We'll work on some switches, some load and lifts, right? If you did our acceleration workshop, you see all those drills in there. We have sled push, band resisted sprints, belly, half kneeling starts, chases and races. These are all from the acceleration code. But that's pretty much how we will fill that in. And again, each one of these things won't take very long. Maybe our warm-up is 8 to 12 minutes, maybe jump, carry, throws 5 minutes, and then maybe we save like 6 to 10 minutes for our speed work. And we'll go through a couple of drills. We'll do a couple of sled pushes to kind of prime the system. We'll usually do a couple of sequences that we'll call like speed prep, and then we'll do our speed work, right? Which is where we're kind of challenging that stuff. So we might do a couple of sled pushes, a couple of band resisted sprints, then we'll hit some sort of chase and race to really get the athletes with maximum intent and maximum drive. And after that, we'll come to the strength work and we'll finish with some sort of heavy squat, maybe a 5x5 front squat, or we'll do some descending ladder of that sort of thing, maybe a deadlift, conventional deadlift, sumo deadlift, trap bar deadlift. I don't care what variation of heavy bilateral movement you do. Just do something heavy that has the focus on them getting in and out of those positions. So that's our acceleration work. Now, if you do have time or you're working with athletes that are focused on acceleration, you have time for conditioning. The 10x10 protocol is great. Relay races are great. Remember, we're going from zero to start. Short relay races. I saw a great one on Instagram recently where they had a relay race. They had to go to an object, do like a circle around it, then continue accelerate, do something, accelerate some more. And different shuttle runs, right? So shuttle runs down and back. You have to stop, accelerate, and do that sort of thing. We have a pretty big length of turf, and sometimes we'll do like 15, yard shuttle runs. We'll go down and back a couple times to really work on the conditioning of that changing direction as well as stopping and starting. Also, in the 10x10 protocol, there's also something called shotgun sprints, which is a similar concept, but instead of doing the 10 and decelerating, you get to the 10, stop and turn around as fast as you can and wait for the next whistle. So a similar concept to the 10x10s. We do both of them with our kind of football team to get them rocking and rolling. Max velocity, all right, similar concepts, but now a little different posture and position. So acceleration, we're an airplane. Max velocity, we want to feel like we're marching in place, and we want to feel 2 inches taller, right? So when you're thinking about max velocity or top end speed, that's what we're looking at posture and position wise. 2 inches taller, marching in place. Okay, so some of these things reflect that. So as march, pike pulses are more of our hip flexor things. Our L-sits are hip flexors and quads kind of like together. We want to add some more quad dominant stuff like goblet squats, cyclist squats, wall sits, single leg deadlifts just to get some other posture stuff. And then we want to think about like the core because of like the dynamic nature of sprinting full speed. If you see like we're trying to fight that rotation, a lot of times when I get back into sprinting, if I haven't done it in a while, my ribs, under my ribs are real sore. That's because I'm not used to doing those anti-rotational core movements and muscles that are required to kind of stabilize my spine as I'm working at, maximum speed. So working on some sort of like anti-rotational core there with shoulder taps, bear crawls, Pallof presses, and things like that. And then again, we talked about being springy in the max velocity stuff. So ankle springs with some calves and build some strength there. Jump, carry, throws, all similar as the acceleration stuff, but now the intent is different, right? So as I'm doing acceleration, I'm doing a horizontal projection. Now I'm thinking about more vertical projection. So instead of maybe doing skips for distance, I'm doing skips for height. Instead of maybe doing bounds for distance, maybe I'm doing bounds for height. Instead of doing hops for distance or speed, maybe I'm doing hops for height. So just giving you a different projection of your body and feeling out in space. And then it gives you an idea to how I can now carry that over into my thing that I'm doing. All right, mixed carries, right? Maybe a carry overhead while I carry here, So again, trying to do some different variations to challenge the core in different ways. Ball slam still, and then maybe a vertical toss, where you're kind of doing that granny scoop. And, our ceilings aren't high enough to do this, but in the summertime, sometimes we'll go outside and we'll throw the ball up as high as we can, or behind us as high as I can to get that dynamic, fast hip extension that you might see at the end of a sprint. Speed work, we're looking for vertical projection, posture, turnover, and bounce, right? We like to work on overhead drills with a PVC pipe or a medicine ball, that where we'll do skipping, bounding, things like that, where we're trying to hold and kind of get posture upright and really fix postures. We're working on wall drills, different variation of wall drills than we would for and we're working on like kind of the turnover mechanics of max velocity. Flying tens or floating drills. So flying 10 usually have a run in, 10-yard run in, where then you're trying to get a time where you're going. And then floating drills are, let's say you sprint for 10, you try to maintain your posture and position for 10, you accelerate hard for 10 more, and then you try to float and maintain your posture and position, and you can kind of do that continuously. Dribble bleeds, which is where you might do something like a dribble drill, or we used to call it ankling, where you're kind of stepping over your ankle, then you're going to step over your shin, and then you're going to step over your knee. And the bleed is you're bleeding one drill into the next to increase your turnover, to increase your mechanics, and do that kind of stuff. We also do this with different drills. Like I might straight leg bound into or quick straight leg uh, drill into a straight leg bound, and then work on my turnover and getting into position there. So bleeds just mean I'm bleeding one drill into the next. Strength here, I'm working on a little bit more dynamic. This would be a dynamic lower day or dynamic lower effort. Olympic lifts, all of our split squat variations, all of our lunge variations, our skater squats, our single leg squats. We have wall sits and split squat isos. We're working Nordic curls and hamstring curls to help with the strength in that position. So when we're thinking acceleration, we're thinking really hip extension and drive. On max velocity, we're kind of trying to get those hamstrings to prevent them from kind of kicking out, right? A lot of athletes who will open up that angle at the knee, and we want to keep that angle at the knee pretty tight after toe off. So after my toe hits the ground and comes off, I want to try to be able to pull that heel to my butt as quickly as I can and maintain that kind of tight angle at the knee, not letting the foot go out in front of you. And that's where the Nordics and the hamstring curls come in. We don't want that foot to go too far out and land right in front of us. And then conditioning, again, if applicable, we're looking for tempo runs. We're looking for bike intervals. We're looking for things that are a little bit longer that allow us to work on our mechanics, right? So a tempo run could be like 200s, 120s, things like that, where we're just getting athletes to really kind of focus on their postures and position under fatigue and duress. So getting them to do that. We like the bike just to maybe give them a break off of the pounding. Okay. Change of direction and agility, usually my favorite days, honestly, to coach. Sometimes the linear speed stuff, because it's so focused in track and field, and it's so regimented in terms of how we get people faster. There isn't a lot of ability to, I guess, play games or do different stuff with the older athletes. But when we get to the change of direction stuff, this is kind of where we can really have some fun with them and get some gameplay in there. And here we're looking again at, the groin, the hip external rotators, the abductors, the adductors, spinal flexibility, hip stability, like we talked about, crawls, rolls, and ground-based work. We really love, especially like getting our athletes on the ground and moving, somersaults, back bends, cartwheels, and just getting them to move through these different positions. I feel like it just helps them overall be able to manage their body better, to handle more demanding work that we got coming up. Lateral lunges, adductor rocks, mini band work, agility ladders, side shuffles, cariokas, T-spine rotations, single leg stability drills. All these things, like again, you can plug and play, like we talked about with the acceleration stuff. Pick something that stretches your groin, pick something that stretches your external rotators, get something that rotates your spine, get something that stabilizes your hip, and then you're good to go. Just pick and choose as you go. Jump, carry, throw. We like our vector jump series. So if you were in with our agility stuff, you've seen all of our vector jump series. Different pogo variations. You can do pogos laterally. You can do pogos rotationally. You can do all different types of different pogo variations: lateral skipping, lateral hopping, crossover bounds, single-sided carries. I love a suitcase carry, a single-sided front rack carry, a single-sided overhead carry. Again, working in different postures and positions, trying to fight that lateral bend or that rotation. Scoop tosses, working on dynamic rotation. Shot put tosses, again, dynamic rotation from a different position. Speed work, we love our vector cuts. Again, we like to do those out of a box, right? So if you have a box set up, you can go 90-degree cut, you can go 45-degree cut. Um, you can go a 0-degree cut or 180-degree, whatever it is, coming back, and you can work all those different patterns and blend them together or bleed them into each other, like we talked about before. Curved running, and here's where we get into a lot of our small-sided games. We're playing infinity tag, we're playing triple, we're playing Powerball. We're doing a lot of these like small-sided games to get athletes to not only have aggressive angles, body awareness, but also spatial awareness to be able to read the field. Because I think that's a key component that a lot of people don't train athletes to do in this kind of training setting. Maybe they do it in sport, but if they're not getting a lot of times to play or train or see the field or and navigate the field to learn and do that kind of stuff, they're not getting that spatial awareness to read. So we try to incorporate small extended games as much as we can to get athletes to read the field a little bit more. All right. Strength work, upper body focus, usually when we go with our agility days. These also, the speed work in these days usually take a little bit longer because of gameplay, because we will let a game go longer because I find more value in it than the strength work. For athletes at our level, even athletes in college, like I find more value in them playing a game and having fun than hitting a heavy lift for that particular day. If they're into it and they're have some high intensity, I'm just going to let them rock with it. I'm not going to impede on it. Usually, like our rule is like if it stops being fun or they stop being engaged, we'll kind of stop it. So if it takes 8 minutes for that, then we'll stop it. If it takes 20 minutes, then we'll stop it. We kind of have some variability there with the game that we have and the group of kids that are in that group. Again, upper body focus, and we might incorporate some lower body stability things just for rehab purposes of like hips or knees or ankles. Dumbbell snatches, bench pressing, overhead pressing, chin-ups, pull-ups, suspension rows, dumbbell rows, prone rows, anything, hanging variations, climbing variations, old school like bis and tris, kids love that, the t-shirt stuff. But pretty much traditional upper body kind of strength days that most people at any gym, at anywhere has ever done. And then from there, we might incorporate some vector conditioning or more games that are more conditioning oriented. So we love our vector conditioning. If you have bigger space, even in our smaller space, we might take our vector conditioning as a station idea where we might take a couple of change of direction drills and pair them up into these stations and have athletes work for 15 to 20 seconds there, rest for 15 to 20 seconds, do the other side of it, and then rotate through these sequences. And it feels like if you've ever done it, it feels like you just went through a practice or a game. And that's the closest thing I think I've ever found that feels like that in the gym. And it allows athletes to kind of move a lot, move in a lot of different ways, and have a lot of fun in the process because it doesn't get monotonous because we switch it up so frequently. All right. So that's all the programming kind of template and ideas. We could dive a little bit more into reps and sets and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that stuff is as important. And reps and sets for most things, we're going to range from 15 to 25 reps for our main strength work. So a squat, we might go 6 sets of 4, 5 sets of 5, 7 sets of 3, different things like that. To allow athletes to have time for it. We kind of stay in that 15 to 25 range for our main lifts, for our heavy stuff. And the other stuff, like the accessory work, depending on what we're looking at for anywhere from like 50 to 100 reps. For athletes who want to get better at a bench press, and they have a testing thing, I might try to get them to do 100 tricep extensions in a session, versus like pull-ups or chin-ups, like we shoot for like 50. Okay, so 50 to 100 reps for the accessory stuff or the secondary work, but for the main stuff, anywhere from 15 to 25 reps is usually a good place to kind of do total work volume. We don't factor in the warm-up sets or things like that, but total work volume at the 15 to 25 rep scheme. I had a question earlier about how do you program differently for groups versus individuals? Does this change a little bit? Now, the only thing that changes based on sport or individuals is we might, where there's a lot of flexibility here in some of this, as you see. But instead of, let's say, if we're doing a change of direction drill, I might add something in their program if they have a knee issue that is more similar to our acceleration work or our quad strength stuff here. So if they have a knee issue, I might throw in something like a wall sit, a split squat hold, or things like that to give them some isometric holds to kind of build some tendon health in that area if they have a knee issue. If they are a soccer athlete, we might stay, a female soccer specifically, we might stay more unilateral all the time in terms of our strength work, and we might focus on, some rudimentary kind of like plyometric prep work where we're working on stability, especially in the lateral and change of direction drills, because that's where we see a lot of ACL injuries. So in that plyometric sense, we might regress somebody to be a little bit more stiff in those positions, especially for a soccer athlete. If we're working with rotational athletes, volleyball, baseball, lacrosse, field hockey, we might incorporate more rotation into their program a little bit more frequently than we would. We might do a little bit more mobility in their spine than we would for our everyday athlete. So again, it just depends on kind of like we want to deconstruct the sport, look at what the needs of the sport are movement wise, look at what the athlete brings to the table, and then give them stuff that kind of matches what they need. And then in terms of injury, we want to work around all the stuff and then give them things that they can do to make sure that they are getting better with their injury. If it's knees, they're getting better with their knees. If it's hips, they're getting better with their hips. If it's their shoulders, they're getting better with their shoulders. Like how do we pair those things in there? We might just throw them into, if you look at here in our, acceleration day. Right here, it might say heavy bilateral focus on the squat. It says upper shoulder focus. So traditionally, maybe we'll do an upper like shoulder kind of rehabby exercise. So if it's somebody with some sort of different issue, then we might just plug and play something different into that portion of it. So you always have the freedom to add supersets or trisets, and you might have two things in there, for our accessory work, and then we might throw a third thing in there, like, hey, I want you to do this leg extension iso for your knee patellar tendonitis at this particular moment. Oh, you have Achilles tendonitis. Let's do some more of these kind of like isometric floating heel variations, and we'll move away from like the flat heel variations. Or we might do some single leg calf raises or single leg calf isos instead of this particular movement. So instead of the plyos. So just we have this as a database, as a template to follow, and then depending on the athlete you're working with, it's also you can always just plug and play different things in there depending on what the needs of that sport are or what the needs of the individual athlete are. Hope that was helpful. You guys will get this document, and let me know if you have any questions or if you need some more finer details on the progressions of things or the rep schemes or like how much sprinting we're doing or how many carries, throws, jumps, and stuff we're doing. But most of the time it stays pretty minimal. It's not a ton because we know athletes are doing a ton of stuff outside of here as well, but we do want to still get some sort of stimulus. And the best stimulus is over the course of a life cycle, not in a 6 to 8 week program, which is how we end up getting most of the athletes. So have fun, keep it simple, and enjoy.